Our closing speaker today, Renee Grassi. Renee has been also with us since the first Targeting Autism program. Author, blogger, speaker, and trainer. Renee Grassi is a recognized library leader and advocate for people of all abilities. Renee considers herself an ally for those with autism and other disabilities and presents nationally and internationally to help libraries be more equitable and inclusive for all. In 2012, she was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker for launching Deerfield Public Library's first disability-friendly programs. Renee went on to develop new inclusive programs and services for patrons of all ages at the Glencoe Public Library and the Glen Ellen Public Library. She's been a member of the ALSC Committee for Special Populations and Their Caregivers, and was one of the founding board members of Illinois' Targeting Autism Forum. She was also one of the co-founding members of SNAILS, an Illinois networking group dedicated to developing more accessible libraries for children and teens with disabilities. A graduate of Dominican University's Library and Information Sciences program and proud Illinois librarian for nearly 10 years, Renee relocated to Minnesota, where she resides with her husband and 2 cats, much closer to her library-loving nieces and nephews. Renee is currently the Youth Services Manager at Dakota County Library in Minnesota. Renee.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you to Suzanne and the Targeting Autism team for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to be back amongst so many friends and colleagues and peers and meet new people that I've never met before, and also to be here at my alma mater where I was learning how to be a librarian before I knew my real passion, which was to help make libraries more accessible to their communities, to serve everybody. And so the theme of the overall Targeting Autism that I've kind of gathered has been a lot of civil rights and making sure that we're advocating for and with people with autism and autistic individuals. And so the name of my presentation today is called Opportunity with Olmstead. And you've already heard it mentioned a few times as some recent legislation that talks about community integration. And I think that legislation, along with the mission and the vision of public libraries as being community institutions where everyone is welcome, I think it's just such a perfect combination. And so what I'll be talking about today is a little highlight about Olmstead Act, as well as some of the work that I've been doing in the state of Minnesota for these last 3 years since I moved from Illinois, and how to make it more inclusive to people with disabilities, certainly autistic individuals, but everybody. So like some of the presenters already before, I'll be talking maybe in more generalities, but I'll also be talking more specifically about people with autism. But I do want to highlight one thing from my bio, which is that I am not a person with autism. I don't present any physical disabilities, but I consider my role, my identity as an ally and an advocate, having done this work for years. I've learned so much for those of you who are autistic and who are part of the autism community, and I am constantly always learning. I don't like the word expert or anything like that. I think that's weird. It's weird because libraries are always learning as a profession, and I always try to make sure that I'm doing better, and the work that we are doing in our communities is striving to be more inclusive. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for staying on a Friday afternoon and for this last presentation, so thank you. How many of you have seen this image or a version of this image before? Okay. For those of you that haven't, I'll just kind of provide a little bit of a brief overview. The idea of equality, which is represented visually on the left side of the image, really kind of takes a look at giving everybody the same supports, the same type of supports, with the hope that the outcome will be equal. But as we see in the picture, that is not the case. The outcome of equal supports is not a positive one, it's not equal, because there are systemic barriers to equality and access, which are represented by the boxes and the fence to the soccer game. On the right is something that we at Dakota County Library are trying to do much, much more in all aspects of our services, really focusing on an equity-focused model for services for everybody. And so you realize that when you look at this picture, maybe everybody's supports are different, and that's okay, because we want the outcome to be inclusion for all, and that experience to be the same for everybody. A true, I guess, liberated image would not have the fence, it would not have any supports at all, and everybody is just able to watch the soccer game from where they are, right? They wouldn't have to have any of those additional supports, but we know that that's not the reality of our society. There are barriers, systemic and otherwise, that we need to address, and so that's how that image kind of is depicted. And the reason I start with this image is because opportunity to access is honestly what libraries are all about. Libraries are about accessing information, and if we don't start by naming those barriers or even being aware of those barriers for individuals as well as groups of individuals, we can't move forward. So we are really trying to take an equity approach to all of our library services, and that includes those individuals who are autistic and other disabilities. And we've heard so much throughout this forum that access to services, to employment, to healthcare, to self-actualization, to empowerment, to self-learning, does not allow for positive or even equitable outcomes. And what libraries are all about is now certainly transforming their communities. And in order to do that for the autistic community, we need to start with opening up access. I think that a lot of us in this room probably have a sense of, at least a little bit of a sense of disability history. This is by no means everything, and this is only very recent disability history. But what I do want to focus on is that 1999 tick mark that ruled unnecessary institutionalization discriminatory. As we know, the Americans with Disability Act happened in 1988, and we have celebrated many decades since then. But the thing with the Olmstead Act is that it's actually about community integration. And I think, again, that's where libraries are at their heart. Excuse me while I drink some water. So in 1999, there was a case brought to the Supreme Court, and this was brought by two female individuals who experienced a personal situation that they wanted to that they felt was not advocating for their own choice. They were individuals with disabilities, and they wanted to advocate for their own desire to live independently. And so in 1999, that's when the Olmstead versus LC court ruling took place, which eliminated unnecessary segregation. And I think for the librarians in this room, I mean, this isn't anything that we learn in our library degree. We don't learn about disability history. This is not something that we necessarily, are aware of, but I do think that it's important to talk about because it has direct implications for who's coming into our libraries and what we can do differently. It mandated services be in the most integrated setting appropriate to needs, and it also mandated unjustified isolation for individuals with disabilities, and that itself was, it was mandated unlawful discrimination. And so since that year, every state has, I think, thought about Olmstead in a different way. And not every state has what's developed as an Olmstead plan, but as someone who currently lives in Minnesota, I am proud to say that we do have an Olmstead plan. As I said, not every state has one, but the states that do have taken into account the spirit of the legislation and come up with actionable and measurable outcomes for those states to help encourage individuals, autistic individuals, people with disabilities, to move towards that outcome of being fully integrated in the community. So our original Olmstead plan was proposed in 2013. It was fully adopted in 2015. And we're one of not many states that have one. So one of the goals of this Olmstead plan was to ensure that people with disabilities were living, learning, working, and playing, as youth librarians would say, or enjoying their lives in the most integrated setting possible. The phrase full inclusion, full supports for full inclusion is maybe something that some of you have heard before. It includes the opportunity to live close to family and friends, things that all of us may have already experienced. Living more independently, engaging in productive employment. We've heard a lot during the forum already of how important employment is and how important independent life is to positive life outcomes. And then a participation in community life. And there are 11 key topic areas in Minnesota that addresses various aspects of the spirit of the Olmstead plan. And while I could go through all of them, I'm highlighting here the ones that I think particularly relate to libraries. We have services and impact in a lot of these areas. And I think that as we think about the spirit of Olmstead, whether or not our state has a plan, we can think about community integration from this perspective. And of course, the last one, lifelong learning and education. Everybody has the right to learn throughout their lifetime, and we can connect people with those resources. So a little bit about my library. I currently live in a suburb of Dakota County, which is the third most populated county in Minnesota, where the Mall of America is and the airport. As you think about the Minnesota, Minneapolis, Twin Cities area, I'm about maybe 10 miles from Mall of America. That's my mall, which is pretty cool. And I like shopping, so it all works out for everybody, except my pocketbook, but you know. So we have a very unique community. We are 1/3 rural, we are 1/3 urban, and we are 1/3 suburban. And that presents its own challenges as we think about transportation and geography. Our 9 libraries, we have 9 branches, are throughout the entire county. We have a population of about 400,000 people. And our website is there if you want to learn more. But our 9 libraries are located pretty much either in the northern part of the county or the central to northern part of the county. We really, admittedly, don't do a great job serving the southern part of the county. So anyway, I just want to give you a little bit of context as to where we are and how we might be similar or different from your libraries. One of the reasons why I'm really excited to be here today is to talk about some of the work that Dakota County Library has done in serving autistic individuals and the autism community. It just sort of happened that when I moved to Minnesota, 6 months later, I got a call or an email that the Public Health Department, Social Services Department of the county had received this state grant to serve people with autism more inclusively in their community. And they just wanted to know if the library would be involved. Little did they know I have kind of a long history of this work, and I was just ready to start working right away. And so I don't think they knew how enthusiastic of a partner the library would become. So what ended up happening was that the county received this grant, and it specifically targeted 2 areas that related to our library services. Training of individuals who work at the county and live in the community, as well as service development. And service was very broad, defining service. So not only were there many grants for families who needed to get a lift to take their son to and from grocery shopping. So very innovative things, to actually paying for social services classes or IEP support during a meeting. There was a wide variety of services available through this grant, but one of the things that the library benefited from was actually that we got to have programming and opportunities paid for and supported by the grant. But before we did anything, we've talked a lot about elevating autistic voices. And I have always been an advocate of having informed services and informed practices at a library that are relating to community feedback and what people are actually wanting for in your community. I hear so many stories from librarians that say, oh, I've developed this great idea program or this sensory story time. I put it out into the world and nobody came. Well, I mean, it could have been a very well-designed program, but how do you know that it's what your community wants? Is there a need? And we don't know until we ask. So in partnership with the social services department who got this grant, we designed a county-wide survey that involved in-person focus groups, online surveys, so that people could participate in a variety of ways, asking questions about library experience. And it was specifically targeted to the autism community, including self-advocates. And one of the questions we asked was, it was an anonymous survey, but we asked people to self-identify. So if you're a self-advocate or an individual with autism, or a professional, or a parent, or a community member. And we did get a good portion of self-advocates actually responding to our survey, either in the focus groups or on the survey. But we also wanted to ask their recommendations. So we used a lot of our community partnerships and utilized all the networks that were going on in the actual county department and sent this out, hosted our in-person programs and focus groups, and this is what we learned. The number one recommendation from autistic individuals, from the autism community, from everybody that participated, was that librarians and libraries need to be trained. And which is why I think this is such an important forum, and the legacy of this forum and your work is going to continue on. In libraries, people who work in libraries need to know more. We need that awareness before we can move to the acceptance piece. We need to understand differences, and we need to also accept differences so that we can better support those people in our communities. Another thing that we asked was about programming. And for those of you who work in libraries or who want to work in libraries, programming is kind of the bread and butter of what libraries do. I mean, we are all about access and information, but we also like bringing people into the library or going out into the community to get people together to connect and maybe have a shared experience or learn something. But we don't always know the best way to do that for the autistic community. And so we asked two questions. Should libraries integrate people with autism spectrum disorder into existing library programs? And then a second question, should libraries offer special programming to people with autism spectrum disorder? Well, as you can tell, our results provided some very interesting feedback. The first question is asking, in really our minds, should libraries have a more inclusive approach? Should we make all of our programs more inclusive? As opposed to the second question, which is, should we design more targeted programs or programs that have maybe in the name of the title or the description, something that is more geared to the disability community? And yet, what this tells me is that people want options. 97% of the people, of course, agree. Inclusion is exactly what we want. We want libraries and people with ASD to be participatory members. We want autistic individuals at the library participating in everything. But we also received feedback, especially in a lot of the comments, that model doesn't work for everybody, self-advocates and families alike. So I think there were a lot of questions in these past 2 days, like what is the best approach? And I always advocate for asking your community, because all of our communities are different, and until we know what our community wants, we're not going to know what's effective or impactful. And I've done this survey before in other communities here in Illinois, and I've gotten similar responses. People just want options. Another thing we wanted to assess was, how do people know that the library is around? What kind of communication methods do they use to access the library and our information? How do they find out about us? And we usually ask this question through paper surveys at our programs, asking people who come to the library, hey, how'd you hear about this program, or how'd you hear about this service? Which is a pretty common thing to do in libraries. And most of the time when we ask that at Dakota County Library, people say, oh, we heard about this program in your print program guide. Your print guide that tells us all of your programs. And that is by far and away the #1 most popular answer. But what this survey told us is that our library website was the #1 way for people to identify library services that were available in their community, which was completely different, because everybody who's identifying the print program guide, who's coming into the library, this is a totally different audience. This is a completely different audience of users, and we're really not taking into consideration that there are users we're not serving. And if we keep trying to market and promote to the people that keep using our library, we're not really trying, and we're not doing any good or impact to try and reach those audiences that don't know about us, or those that are underserved. So we at the very least knew we need to do something online, knowing that that's not everything that you can do, and I'll talk about that. But then we also realized that not everybody was aware of the library. So there was a promotion piece, there was an opportunity for growth in that area. One of the other questions we learned was that people had a generally positive experience with the library. Now, outside of definitely some questionable and unfortunate situations we learned about in the comments, for the most part, people felt that the library was a trusted institution. And this really does match some of the statistics and the feedback we see through the Pew Report annually. People think of the library as a safe space. And we were able to unpack a little bit of that at the same time, though, in the comments. They also felt generally welcome, the people that responded to this survey, and I should say we had upwards to 300 when we did this first initial pass. And yet at the same time, here's just another visual representation. Even though they think of the library in a positive way, they don't necessarily know what we offer, and we really learned that there's an opportunity for growth in that area. And again, here's another visual representation. We asked about social media. That was the #2 way that people found out about the library. Again, completely different from the data we had been tracking in our internal evaluation through our programs, our program evaluation. Program guide didn't even pop up until #4. So again, completely different audience, a completely different set of answers. We also asked about services and what people might be interested in the library. And #1 and #2, computer skills programming and communication tools and resources. We all know libraries offer computer skills programming, so that's great. We already have something to serve a need because they're telling us that that's what they want, and we offer that. But this also identified an opportunity for something that we would eventually address and develop, which were communication tools and resources about the library. Thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate that. No, we appreciate you. When I was talking about services earlier, one of the things that we decided to do was reach out to our community partners. I always say that libraries have the most successful and impactful reach. Got like a little strobe light thing going on.
The disco music's gonna start soon, right?
Yeah, I did thank you way too soon, Suzanne.
There's a now.
Oh, yeah, and this one was flickering yesterday, so. Are we good?
Russ figured it out last night. I would just take my fingers off the camera. Oops.
Right there. Let me try.
I mean, if I were to to talk right now, nobody would be listening because we'd all be distracted by the lights anyway, so might as well wait. Oh, yeah. It's Friday. That's good. Okay. Community partnerships, we've heard a lot about the importance of that. Libraries don't know everything. I know that that might sound like surprising to some of us librarians, but we don't always have the answers, even though we have the access to information at our fingertips. What I mean by answers is that we don't always know the right strategies or the right information or how to best approach being welcoming to people that may not have always been welcome at our libraries. And so you take the idea of a book club. Book clubs being very common, very popular in libraries across the country. Well, just the concept of a book club, I think, is very problematic to potentially individuals that may have a different or uncomfortable relationship with reading. Every person with autism is different and may have a different experience with reading. And that's true for everybody. Let's honor that too. Not everybody identifies themselves as a reader, but people come to the libraries for other things besides reading. All that's to say, we connected with a community partner, and that partner was the Autism Society of Minnesota. And they're an incredible advocacy organization, but they also provide training and service and support to individuals with autism, families, as well as organizations who want to try and serve the autistic community more inclusively. They came to us knowing that there was a grant that we had access to and said, we'd love to provide more community experiences, and the library, we think, is a great opportunity for that. And I have been trained in Next Chapter Book Club training, so I utilized that experience a little bit to work with them to design a program that we call the Awesome Book Club. This is a free monthly book club for participants of all abilities, and that's how it's promoted and that's how it's marketed. But in the description, we also say it's designed for individuals with autism or other disabilities and neurotypical individuals ages 14 and up. All reading levels are welcome. Multiple formats are encouraged and supported. I'll talk a little bit about how the program works, but we want to make sure that people feel that reading or the experience of reading is a positive one and that everyone's supported at their own level. It's monthly, and we first started out the first 3 or 4 months doing all the same book, right? Like the traditional book, the same experience, just like a typical book club. We quickly learned that that was not the best fit for our group of autistic individuals. We had, and I go to every single program. It's one of the best things that I get to do every month. It's always a Thursday evening, and no matter how busy or tired I am from the day, I go and I connect with everybody, and it's just such a fantastic day. It's co-facilitated by myself and a local special education teacher with a specialty in literacy for kids and students with disabilities. And we started off by picking the same book, and because there were some individuals in our group that were reading very, very high reading level and others that really needed the support of audiobooks and didn't have very high reading level on their own, we quickly learned that we had to move towards more of a genre or theme type of monthly format. And so what we decided was to give individuals, to give everybody choice in the book club. We never talk about this book club as our book club. This is the people who are participating. This is their book club. So they get to pick the monthly themes. They get to choose the books that they want. We help them utilize the catalog, our online catalog, so there's life skills and there's actually some practice that's involved there with navigating the library. They get to decide what they read, and we give them options, and then they come back the next month sharing 5 things that they either liked, didn't like. Some individuals have a huge list on a notepad of all the things that they wanted to talk about. Other people, it's more supportive to do kind of a question-answer type of conversation. But it's a much more accessible format that really meets individuals where they are. And what's happened now, because this program is 2 years 2 years old, we are seeing the original outcomes and the original goals of the program really coming to life. Not only are the individuals themselves having increased opportunities for life skills like coming to the library, and everybody has different communication skills. Some people were already very comfortable coming to the library, asking questions and having conversations. Others, not as much. And so this is giving that real life experience in the library. And again, a safe environment to practice some of that. Socialization and connection, we're able to, as we're talking about everything that people are enjoying, they talk about what they like, and then they can hear what each other likes, and you see some of the connections and the conversations happening as people are sharing their books. Or if one person likes a book, the next person that next month, Lord of the Rings has been passed around like 3 or 4 times because that's been a really popular one with our group members. We've had as many as 10 in one class, and we've had as little as 2, but last month we had 7, and I would say at least 5, if not 6 of them, are regular monthly attendees. And these are individuals that I know by name, that Amanda knows by name, and that the staff who work on Thursdays know by name. And so there is so much relationship building happening within this program. And I remember something that Barbara Clipper said to me once really early on. It might have been at one of these forums. If reading comprehension and literacy and some of those, more academic skill-based things end up happening in a library program, that's great. But at the end of the day, it's about connection. It's about community. And when I think about the impact of this program, it's about community. It happens in a room with a glass window, and everybody who walks by it, it's very visible in the library, everybody who walks by sees it happening, and they see these individuals coming to the library to read and then to talk about reading. And the idea that individuals with disabilities or autistic individuals are not readers, that's so not true. We've heard that so many times. But then this is just a more visible outward example of how the library can elevate individuals with autism out in their spaces. And so this is how and you'll have copies of this presentation too, but I know it's always an interesting question people ask, how do you market it? This is our library website, so you have our program description. We also have partnered with other community organizations, including the Minnesota Organization of Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. MOFAST, it's been renamed since the last year, but fetal alcohol syndrome, while a disability that may be different from autism, has his physical and also other characteristics that are similar to autism in terms of its presentation. And there are several individuals who are part of this organization that are co-diagnosed or have co-diagnoses with autism and fetal alcohol syndrome as well. We had connected with them because we went to a community meeting, as many community partnerships often are developed. They were really interested in our technology lab, what we call our iLab, with some of our makerspace technology. We have a green screen, we have the ability to make stop motion animation, we have 3D printing. A lot of our libraries here in Illinois have these things, but this was an introduction to the library to get library cards and also to provide parent and caregiver respite, something that individuals could attend independently, but also be introduced to the library in a more intentional way. And so this is Tom actually providing one of those programs that we did as a series to the students. And we provided very basic text and visual schedules of what we would be doing. The group organizers through MOFAST gave an outline of the program in advance to the youth so that they knew what to expect. And we all had a great time. And there are several kids that came from that original meeting and still come to the library to our iLab to print on a regular basis. And Tom and them have that first name connection, and on a regular basis they're always coming to the library. So it's great to see that follow up and that community connection. I'm going to talk a little bit about the next thing that we've been doing in our library, which is a really exciting project. But I just want to pause and say, if you take anything away from some of these ideas, I think really like the main heart and the main core of the impact of this work has been developed from those one-on-one relationships. It's one-on-one relationships with autistic individuals, with the parents and the caregivers, with the community partners that advocate and have allyship with autistic individuals. And we have seen a lot of success, quote unquote success of numbers, which unfortunately doesn't always happen right away, but we've seen that happen because we take the time to develop and build those relationships. And one of those outcomes of building relationships was our knowing about, learning about, and eventually receiving a $100,000 grant from the state for disability services across our library system. And I have truly the honor of managing this grant and working with people in our library to help affect and impact a variety of areas in our library, not just in support of autistic individuals, but also a variety of disabilities. If I were to kind of break out in squares, what areas this grant impacts, this is what it would be. This grant pays for consulting services and an assessment of our website. We have a community partner, an advocate, who's going to be doing listening sessions in our communities with and actually at disability organizations and homes with self-advocates to learn more, like kind of what we've been doing here at Targeting Autism, to learn how we can be more welcoming in our libraries. We are developing, in partnership with some of our community partners, some accessibility tools. One of those includes a communication ring with some of those visual supports that we could use with nonverbal individuals in the library as we're trying to communicate with them, or if they're trying to communicate with us. I mean, this is an example of universal design. It also helps those who are English language learners who really could help communicate through pictures a lot better. It also includes our accessibility kits that we're rolling out. We piloted at one library and we're rolling out to all of our libraries. I'll talk about that later. It covers marketing, so Facebook ads, flyers like the ones you got, swag, because who doesn't like swag? But I have found these really, really great, and we've received a lot of feedback from other autistic individuals. Stress balls with our logo on them, and we give them out at every single library program, but they're really positive. Programming for adults, kids, teens, staff training. I really think I already have in mind our keynote for our next staff training, which is going to be in December, and I think she's in this room. So we have just obvious learning to do in the library world, and it's constant. And then I'll be talking about our calming spaces and programming kits for our librarians. But I mentioned our accessibility team. Our accessibility project team, which I have the honor of overseeing, is a group of about 8 or 9 individuals from throughout our system. We have branch managers, we have librarians, we have frontline circulation staff, and these are people that come from different libraries who come together to focus the work of the grant. And our goal is really to support innovation on accessibility and inclusion at the library. We have something called a Bright Ideas form, so when staff have an idea that they would like to see pushed forward, they submit it to the committee, and then we can actually support that idea come to fruition. And we've been supporting staff with disabilities as well with some accessibility efforts in our library because of the Bright Ideas form. And ultimately, all of this has positive impact on the culture of our library being more accessible. We have such a great partnership in the Autism Society in Minnesota. I've become such dear friends with Robin, who is one of their educational specialists, and she's done a lot of our trainings, but she's also consulted on the development of our accessibility kits. And these kits, like I said, we piloted in one library to start, and we're going to be rolling them out to 9 libraries. These are kits that are going to include tools and supports and manipulatives that are available for anybody to use. You don't have to show your autism card at the desk or anything. I mean, this is like anybody can use it, no stigma attached. We're actually thinking of putting them near the service desk and not behind the service desk so that people don't have to out themselves or even be stigmatized for asking for the item. It doesn't require a library card to use in the library or ID, and it's for all ages. And things that are included include supports for communication, tactile supports, visual supports, auditory supports. We have sunglasses, we have noise-canceling headphones, we have visual timers and various fidgets. There's a variety of supports that are available for people to use. But to help support communication for using the accessibility kits, we have a visual menu of those items. So if for some reason we had someone come to the library and they were nonverbal, we have communication supports that could help interaction. We also have a visual menu of all of the items that are in the accessibility kit. You will notice that there are earplugs. We have those, of course, those are one use only. We have chewies, one use only, and nose plugs, also one use only. And I will tell you, this accessibility kit really came in handy when we were hosting our first early open program, which I'll talk about too, because we're a county library system. Some of our libraries share spaces with other county departments, and we don't always get the say in how those spaces are utilized. And so one day, it was our first early open program, so I was already on edge and wanting to make sure everything was great. I go into the room where we were going to do our storytime experience, and the room reeks of chili. They had a cooking class or a crock pot gathering the night before, and it was the room that I definitely did not want any extraneous sensory input available. So I rushed over to my accessibility kit. I grabbed a couple of the nose plugs and I put it on the table so that as people came into the program, they could have that option. And it turned out one of the youth that came to the program did want to use the nose plugs because it really was an intense smell. I mean, I was offended by how strong it was. So just to say that even something small like an earplug, one-use nose plug, or something like that really can make the difference in having someone feel comfortable at the library. Not everybody might have a chance to get a $100,000 grant, and I totally want to say that. But we also knew that to be a good steward of the funds, we wanted to try and do something that we'd never done before and something that had the ability to have really positive impact for a long time. And that's where the idea of our calming space began. And we've talked about sensory rooms a little bit here, and one of the things that we wanted to do was create a flexible space that was designed for individuals with autism, sensory integration disorder, anxiety, PTSD, but that can really be used by anybody at any age. And we decided to call it the calming space because we also wanted to take away the stigma or necessarily identifying oneself with quote-unquote autism or quote-unquote disability, and to own the fact that some people need to regulate when they come to the library. There are unpredictable things that happen at the library, like crock pot chili, and you can't always control that. And now libraries are no longer those quiet spaces, but yet people still desire quiet spaces. So we developed our calming space at Galaxy Library, and it's the first of 3. And our 2 other libraries that are getting them are they're in remodel right now, and they are in Hastings, or it doesn't matter where they are because it's in Minnesota. But they are at 2 other libraries in Minnesota in our department, and we're really excited because there has been such positive response that our county is considering incorporating calming spaces in future remodels that they would then assume the funding for. So this is just, in a way, that seed money for a new innovative idea that we could potentially get the support for as we do future remodels. We have social narratives. We have a user guide that has visuals of all the supports in them and how to use them. We have guidelines for use, which are written in positive language, but really just sharing some information about how to use the room. It's an unlockable door with a window, so you could easily tell if it's being utilized, and for safety purposes. We have comfortable seating, we have lighting that's adjustable, we have a sound machine, visual timers, a lot of the supports available, and we have a calming wall, which is something that we're really excited about. It's one of those marble wall features that people can turn on or off depending on if they want it or not. And this is just a visual of that guide. So we have a variety of opportunities in the room, not just for people that are hypersensitive, but people that are looking for more sensory input. And all of this to say, we wanted to create a program series that let people know that these things existed. We wanted to get the word out about the accessibility kits. We wanted to get the word out about our calming space, and so we developed an early open series, and that's what we call it, our sensory-friendly early open series. And I really appreciate the feedback in some of the conversation at the forum this week, or these past few days, about not having separate events. And yet, at the same time, some of the feedback we've received from our community was that programs like this really could benefit me. I mean, I'm speaking as if I was reading the comments in the survey, but we've received feedback that people need additional support or experience visiting the library during off hours or non-peak hours. And so we received the ability or the support to put this series together. We had 3 in our first series, and they were on Sundays for 2 hours right before we opened, and it was just regular library service, which is great, but we also provided additional support. We had an ASL interpreter available if we needed to support that ability. We also had special structured and semi-structured events and activities. We had a visual scavenger hunt with pictures of different places in the library. So if someone wanted to get to know the new library, the remodeled library, but wanted to walk around, they could do that with that visual scavenger hunt. We developed a social story just for the calming space that was available, and we had some of our organizations available too. Our first series, our first program was during snow. And Minnesotans are hardy, and so, but at the same time I was really worried because weather is a huge barrier to transportation and to access, especially in Minnesota. So that first program, I didn't think anybody would come, and we had 29 people. And at the third one, we had 57 in that 2-hour time period. And I really attribute that to all of the community partnerships we had made that helped spread the word. And now we're doing it again this coming summer, and we're going to be doing it again at the other libraries. Because this is about inclusion and because people can have multiple diagnoses, I just also want to share another really exciting program that we've done. It's called our ASL Celebration, and we partnered with a library school student named Matt, pictured right here. And he is a deaf individual, but he also loves libraries and wants to help promote libraries and also build his resume up, which I think that's fantastic. Get some experience in doing library programming. We partnered with him and the Faribault, the School for the Deaf, to offer some ASL storytelling and story time, where he would actually read the stories using ASL, and we would have voice narration. This was a multi-age program. We had people of all ages come, including individuals without children. So there was intergenerational learning experiences. We had lots of activities and crafts as well to extend the learning, and we're just really excited about this, and hopefully to bring more awareness about the actual just community inclusion in itself. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to go through a couple of these slides quickly. We have developed social narratives, which are available on our website as well as in print. And we're really trying to look at marketing and promotion and what it means to talk about libraries in the autistic community and in the disability community. The idea of summer reading as a phrase or as a term is not necessarily accessible if someone doesn't have a positive relationship with reading. And so we changed our program from summer reading to summer discovery that integrates more reading and learning activities and also allows us to advocate the program to individuals with disabilities, including those with autism, that may read different formats or may have a different relationship with reading. We changed our phrase of our program that we do on a monthly basis at 2 locations, Sensory Storytime. After some discussion with some of the community members and some of the feedback, we took the word storytime out, and nobody died. It was okay. I know, because I'm a youth librarian, and so the idea that you took the word storytime out, it's just, I mean, it might just get up against some of our feelings about libraries, but the word storytime has so much baggage, and there's so much imagined, perceived, or otherwise social expectation about what that program looks like, even if we say it's sensory, even if we say all are welcome. We decided to change the name just to Sensory Friendly Saturdays. There are still books. There are still those occupational and therapy-based activities that Barbara Clipper was talking about. There's still visual schedules. It's still a story time, but it's also it's a different way of talking about what we do so that everybody feels welcome. Even just thinking about the word study room, we're trying to use the word meeting room more often, and just again with the word calming space, not wanting to stigmatize the use of a thing or a service based on the fact that it's for only one specific audience. It really can be multi-use. So these are just some suggestions. We have a lot coming soon. I'm really excited to talk about, but I don't have time to talk about it today because it's Friday afternoon. But we have a whole series of programs for all abilities this summer. And I hope to be focusing on that, writing about it on the ALSC blog, which I blog monthly. So if you follow the ALSC blog, you might see information about that coming soon. And we're, as I mentioned, developing those calming spaces in the other 2 libraries. But this is why we do what we do. And this is why I think this is why the Targeting Autism Forum was developed. We want positive outcomes for our communities. And yet at the same time, all of these things happen when we do this work. But this, if I were to have this one takeaway for anything that I do, I mean, it's so that people with disabilities, autistic individuals and their families are more in the spirit of Olmstead, more visible, more participating, more integrated in their communities and their libraries so that they feel supported by us and we can support them in really living their best life. So I just want to say thank you on this wonderful Friday at the end of this great forum. Thank you so much for being here and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Renee.